Welcome back to Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. This is season 3, and we start this season with an episode talking about the journey of living with schizophrenia in yourself or in your family as a game of chutes and ladders. You are never really out of the woods, but there are some wins and hopes along the way. We also congratulate the cast and the production team and playwright of Tell Me I'm Here, a powerful theatrical adaptation of a memoir of the same name produced in Australia. And they used our podcast for inspiration, so we feel like a part of it. Thank you so much. Welcome. Welcome to our podcast, Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. From the place where schizophrenia and real life collide. East Coast, West Coast, Middle America. With Miriam Feldman, Mindy Greiling, and Randye Kay. We have a lot coming up. The three of us have to get together and figure out schedules and everything, but definitely coming up this season, we're going to hear from Dr. Gary Tsai, who is a psychiatrist specializing in co-occurring disorders. He's a documentary filmmaker. He did an award-winning documentary called Voices, the Voices documentary, and author of Against All Odds. So he's coming on, and he's also a family member, I believe. And then Stephanie Marquesano, who was featured in the New York Times and got a lot of requests to be interviewed, and she chose us. We're so excited. She's going to talk about her son and the loss of her son and the life of her son, and something she created in Westchester County called the Harris Project. And I believe you can go to theharrisproject.org, but we'll find out more about that. And we've spoken a lot last season about Judge Leifman in Florida, and he has agreed to come on the podcast. And we also, I just found out today, you guys don't know this, but there is a memoir that preceded ours by 30 years called Tell Me I'm Here. And yes, it's she was an.
I was just reading something about that.
Because we've talked about this. She did a memoir about schizophrenia in her son, and unfortunately also the loss of her son. And it was a beautiful memoir. I've ordered it, but since it's Australia, I haven't gotten it yet. Mindy, I think you ordered it too, but
I've read it. It's a very, very good book. You can tell it's 30 years ahead of us because there are some things that actually have changed. And it's of course Australia, but it's the emotions and what mothers go through and what families go through are timeless. And it's a wonderful.
Absolutely. And so I was just in touch. I had a hard time finding her, but I found her on Twitter with the playwright of a play that they created out of this memoir.
Oh, yeah, that's why I saw that.
That's it. And it is still playing in Australia. The theater is, it's called Tell Me I'm Here. It's Belvoir Street Theater in Australia, and this is having incredible rave reviews. Letitia is the director. Letitia Caceres leads the show with a masterful hand. The performers flourish under her direction. Now, if you're just listening to us, we are all moms of sons we love, and they all have schizophrenia. We've all written memoirs about it, and we advocate for them. And fortunately for us, knock wood, we're all still here. Our sons are all still here for us to share our experiences. And but we know, and tonight's topic is just a catch up, and I'm just calling it You're Never Quite Out of the Woods. Would you guys agree with that sentiment? So we're going to catch up, but in the reviews of this play, it mirrors this. It says, while elements of the first act are challenging, it emulates the chaos of the author's life as she cycles through medical professionals to find help for her son. It leaves you gasping for breath alongside the mother. So this play is getting incredible reviews, and I've been in touch with the playwright, and she is going to come on the podcast.
Oh, the playwright. That's fantastic.
Yeah, she is in England. So now we're becoming international. And so I believe we spoke about this a little bit in the last episodes of season 2, because the cast contacted us the cast and the director all listen to our podcast to get the recent view of what moms go through, and they're just so lovely to us, and I just wish I could see this play. But anyway, we're very excited about all the things coming up. And congratulations to the cast and director and playwright of Tell Me I'm Here. It looks like a very powerful piece of theater, and I'm going to see what I can do about bringing it to Connecticut if I can. But at any rate, that's in the future. And we are all here, and we haven't seen each other for 5 weeks. So I thought we would just catch up and talk like three moms do about what's been going on. And we could tell a good story and a not so good story and take it from there. Sound good?
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'd like to hear first from Mimi, since she's got the dramatic demonstration that nothing's ever for sure story.
Yeah, I actually just came back from Seattle. Nick had his follow-up appointment with the lung specialist there. Yeah, it was quite crazy and unexpected. And it really almost took me down, this one, because I just wasn't ready for another go round. And it was somehow more difficult to comprehend and deal with that it wasn't about his mental state.
Yeah. So tell us, for our listeners who don't know, we were kind of on the text thread by your side as much as we could be through this ordeal, but for our listeners, so tell them what's happened.
Well, so Nick got pneumonia, and it turned into a terrible, terrible pneumonia. And it wasn't COVID. It was just a very bad pneumonia. And they think that it probably started days before he even let us know anything was going on. So it got bad without any treatment first. And then they think it's probably, going over just a million possibilities of how this happened. They think he just kind of got pneumonia, and it got bad. And also because of the clozapine and the excessive salivating, and they're thinking maybe he aspirated a little bit in his sleep and a little piece of something went down into his lungs. That's not uncommon. And he just, he wouldn't go to the doctor the first day, and the second day he was really sick, and I went over there and he wouldn't go. And his caregiver and I were trying to convince him, and finally I ended up I called the paramedics because I just didn't know what else to do. I wasn't going to be able to wrestle a 200-pound, 6-foot tall guy into the car myself.
Was he reluctant to go to a hospital? I mean,
yeah, he didn't want to go.
You? I mean, this is like pneumonia is horrible anyway, but here you have a son whose main experience with hospitals has been psychiatric, right? Yeah. So a problem that's a really bad problem for any family becomes exaggerated, right?
Way worse, because the thing was, he wouldn't say. And I kept saying to him, why won't you go, Nick? They'll take care of you. And finally, and he did not want the paramedics. He was going to be mad at me when they showed up, and they did. But then he said to the paramedic, the paramedic said, why don't you want to go to the doctor? You're sick, you need help. And he says, because the last time I went to the hospital, they kept me there for 6 weeks against my will. And it was a psychiatric hospital. And of course, I should have known this and foreseen this, but it's not something, and it's been a few years since he's been in the hospital, and it's not something that he expresses any day-to-day concern about. But boy, when he was sick, he was hiding it for that reason. And then we got him to the hospital, and he was direly ill. I mean, he was very, very sick, and they admitted him into the hospital. It was here in our small town hospital, and he was there for 4, 5, 6 days, and the last 3 of which they had decided they already needed to send him to a bigger hospital because they didn't have a thoracic surgeon. And then we had to wait 3 days for a bed to open up. There were no beds.
And we're not even talking psychiatric beds. We're talking
regular beds in the hospital.
Oh my God. What was
post-COVID.
happening all this time with his psychiatric meds?
Well, so we get there, and I call Dr. Laitman, and he says, okay, let's just wait till tomorrow and we'll see. Because he talked to Nick on the phone, and Nick sort of sounded okay at that point. But then as soon as we realized how very sick he was, he said, cut the clozapine, because you metabolize it differently when you have inflammation. And when you get very, very sick, your clozapine levels can skyrocket and you can go into clozapine toxicity. So it's something that's very, very dangerous. And people die in the hospital because of it, because if I hadn't been there, they probably could have died from it, because who would have known? They don't know, they don't know about the clozapine. So it's very tricky. So I was there doing my usual thing of running interference, talking to the doctor in New York, talking to the doctors here, trying to get everything taken care of, worried terribly about his psychiatric state, in addition to his, physical state. And he just kept deteriorating. And I mean, he ended up with blood clots in his lungs. He ended up with a collapsed lung. He ended up with, he was in the hospital for 27 days.
Was he also deteriorating mentally?
It's really interesting, because through all of this, his mental state has stayed really good. He's actually better now than he was before. The first day when I brought him into the hospital, he was a little delirious, I think, from fever and just being sick. And he was talking about, he was fixated on figuring out how this happened. And he was talking about, oh, I know what happened, Mom. I know what it is. It's the new people that moved in the building. That happens. And it goes through the vents and it's going through the pipes. And that's how it got in. And I was like, oh man, here, the compensation road, this is going to be bad. But then turned out, I guess that was more because he was kind of delirious, and his mental state stayed really good. I mean, he was really kind of asleep for most of this, because he went into clozapine toxicity twice.
What does that look like? And just so like the Dr. Laitman we're talking about is someone who we've talked about on episodes before, you can check it out. He prescribes clozapine through the eye of the nephrologist that he is, so that he understands the combinations of the clozapine with other things. And we always think about psychiatric drugs, but the fact that he understood clozapine plus the inflammation of the lungs, again, it's testament to how important it is to understand the interactions of all these medications, which not everybody does. Am I right?
No, and certainly, again, there's such a bias against clozapine. I found in the hospital that most of the clinicians and doctors, they didn't want to talk about it. They go, clozapine, and they roll their eyes. And so I was the one trying to manage the clozapine. And clozapine toxicity looks like a coma. You just lose, and you can die. I mean, it's life-threatening. And twice he was in toxicity, once because we didn't know to bring the clozapine down, and once because the doctor at Swedish hospital didn't follow through on changing his orders when I kept telling them to run the levels, and when I saw that it was getting higher, Dr. Laitman called and they told them to cut it down, and they didn't do it. And it was until 3 days later when the doctor changed, and the new doctor called me and said to me, I need to get some idea of his baseline. Is this how he always is? And I said, no, it's not how he always is. He's not even awake.
Why didn't they do what Dr. Laitman said? Is it professional, have your back up if someone tells you what to do, or did he just forget?
I think it fell through the cracks.
For Pete's sakes.
Yeah. But
if you hadn't been there, Mimi, and this is, we always try to get some lessons out of this for our listeners. So if you hadn't been there, what do you think might have happened?
I think there's a good chance he would have died.
Wow.
I mean, he was dancing around that anyway. It got that bad with the pneumonia. And then the complications of all the other things and trying to manage it and stay on top of it and educate people about clozapine, it was a lot. And this is what happens with our loved ones who don't have the mental capacity to advocate for themselves. I mean, really, they say, mental illness, regardless, you should always have somebody advocating for you when you're sick, because you got to keep on top of all these things. But back to the other thing, his mental state, I mean, it's shocking. He seems clearer and more connected than he has since he's been sick. And now we've got him down much lower clozapine because we're slowly building it up because the inflammation's gone, so he can absorb it differently. But I think we're going to end up with a different dosage of less. Yeah. But it's we don't know why or how or what, I mean, there is some research about antibiotics and schizophrenia, and there have been some studies with a certain antibiotic, a certain strong antibiotic, not the one Nick was on. And so there's some noise around that, but nothing proven or anything. But I gotta tell you, he is distinctly better than he was before it started.
How long was he down so low on clozapine?
Well, he was down, for a whole month. It was just very low. And we were but it takes a long, there's a big lag time till you get the results because they have to send it out. It's very hard to keep track of.
The reason I was asking is because Jim at one time had to go cold turkey off of clozapine. And for 2 or 3 weeks, he was better than he'd ever been because he still had the residual benefit of clozapine, but not all the side effects that come with any antipsychotic. So, if we could have kept him that way all his life, we would have been thrilled.
Yeah, it's such a delicate balance. And this is, again, if you're listening for the first time, our books are Fix What You Can. That's Mindy's book. Mimi's is He Came In With It. Mine is Ben Behind His Voices. And what I just wanted to keep reiterating here, because we've been in touch by text and email, but we haven't seen each other on Zoom for a month. One of these days in person, ladies. But I always refer to this journey as, a game of chutes and ladders. Like you think you're loved one is stabilized to an extent and you hold your breath and today was a good day and maybe it wasn't a good day. And then maybe you took a step ahead and then boom, you hit a chute and you're down to square two. And then sometimes it's going really well and they get on the right medication or the right treatment, or they get a job or some unexpected surprise, like they're better after pneumonia. And then you're like climbing up the ladder and you got to square 30. And it's a game. And I think of it like the way friends of mine who've got COVID early on before the vaccinations, and they have long-term COVID and just symptoms that keep popping up and down. It's like long-term schizophrenia. It's always long-term. You're never really out of the woods, but we keep bravely plodding on because of love. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying. This one, for some reason, was the hardest bout for me to deal with, because there was one point in the middle of it when he'd been in the ICU for 14 days and it just wasn't getting better. And then every day was something else. And then they called me in the morning and they said, well, he has blood clots in his lung. And, like all of you, I'm sure, like all of us, I tend to go into just coping mode, and I just, when I'm going through these things. And so I just go into that mode and I just troubleshoot and I take care of things.
Right.
And I hung up the phone and I just got this wave of just fear and grief, but also, wow, after everything, is he going to die of pneumonia? I mean, is that going to be what happens here? And then right after I had that awful feeling, the next thought that came in my mind, because by then it had been 2 weeks of it, of being scared and beaten down and watching him get sicker and sicker. And there was that moment where it came right into my head, the next thought, maybe it's better. Maybe it's just better. Maybe this is how it's supposed to be. He'll be out of his misery, his life of disappointment and pain. And what am I fighting for? You know, I'm fighting for what? Maybe this is how it should be. And then immediately after that,
Guilt.
huge wave of, oh my God, I'm going to hell. You know, I'm just the biggest piece of shit that ever walked the earth. And I sat there and it was like, and usually I don't even go there in the middle of these things happening, but it was like this boom, boom, boom of these thoughts. And it was so overwhelming. And I went in and, you know, my husband and I don't go around and around this anymore because we just troubleshoot. Because if we start to really ruminate, our grief and pain just grows exponentially, and there's not that much new to say. So we kind of don't talk about it that often. But I was just sitting there and it was crushing. It was crushing what I was feeling, the pain of the fear of Nick and the pain of the fear of losing him, and then the guilt of thinking, well, maybe it's better. And I just went in and I just like spilled it all out. And my husband and I sat there and we had a really, you know, one of those just good, close, connected talks that you need to have in order to hang in there and get through this. And then I felt better afterwards, but you know, then it was just still 2 more weeks till he felt better. But that was for me was a real low point.
Sure. You know, feelings come and go. And I don't know a caregiver that I know well who hasn't occasionally thought, and it doesn't have to be schizophrenia. It could be Alzheimer's. It could be whatever. If you're giving your life to caregiving, I think it crosses almost everybody's mind at some point.
Absolutely.
Right. Maybe it'll just
Absolutely.
be, maybe this is supposed to be done now. And then we feel guilty the very next moment because, and I know people who have thought that, and I felt it when my father had cancer, and, you know, he fought valiantly for 12 years and then it looked like it wasn't gonna, I was just like, just, you know, let it be over with. But then when it is, you wish it wasn't. Like you always like having the wish isn't really like a real wish. You're not like asking the genie in the bottle for this to happen, but it's just some of the feelings that flow through us.
Yeah.
And especially with schizophrenia, when things are bad, you wonder.
Well, yeah, I just, you know, it's that wall you hit of his whole life is disappointment and pain, you know, over and over and over. You know, we get used to it and we can deal with this, and you know, the other kids are doing all right, or you know, but for him, this is his one life. Right. And it hit me in a way it hadn't in so many years.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think the longer we go, you know, when you have a plateau or a safe spot or things are kind of stable, and then you're back in it again when you haven't done it for a while, you know, I think it's sometimes worse because the the PTSD comes back, you're right where you were before, and you kind of lulled yourself into thinking you were done with that. So whether it's pneumonia or a mental health crisis, to be in crisis again and thinking maybe this is time for it to be done and feeling guilty, all of that over and over, we've done it so much that I think doing it again is worse after a longer period. I don't know what you guys think of that, but that's what I think.
I do. I think it's, you know, one of the things that always struck me the first time I took NAMI's Family to Family course, which is an 8-week free educational course you can take to arm yourself with education. We highly recommend it. One of the things that I really resonated with was when they said, it's hard because there's no timetable for recovery. If somebody breaks their leg, they're in a cast for a while, then they get out, then there's some physical therapy, and, you know, little by little, you get better and better. So people bring casseroles in the hope that they'll get better. And we always say it's a no casserole illness because people don't bring casseroles, but, you know, sometimes they do. the first time they're in the hospital, but by the time they're in the hospital the 12th time, they don't know what to do. There's no timetable. So it's like I said, it's like chutes and ladders that you can't predict. Oh, he's doing great now. So, maybe 6 months from now, he'll be able to do this and then do that. It's not like so no timetable for recovery is hard. It's again, those ups and downs. How is Jim doing, Mindy?
Well, that was, in case you heard the doorbell in the background, that was
I did.
the door. He got some meds delivered, so that was nice. Jim is actually, we're in one of those stable periods. So watching what was happening with Nick and Mimi just, made me be grateful for where I am. But we just went to Colorado. We went to the mountains. Jim is, that's utopia for him, to nirvana, to be in the mountains. And we went there 3 years ago, and he actually declined to go. We have Roger, my husband, has a brother there. And this time we were there for a family reception, and they had a COVID wedding for one of their sons. So we had a wedding reception, and Jim actually has lost so much weight with being on meds that are for diabetes. He had lost 100 pounds actually in the last year.
Wow.
So he was able to get a suit that he wanted to look nice in. He had it tailored. And so he was, doing really well. And, I think felt like $1 million in that suit. And then we stayed over a few days in a cabin in the Rocky Mountains. So that for him was, like I said, nothing he could do would be better than that. So we hiked and we sat on the porch and drank wine. And so it was, really wonderful to be so happy.
That's so good to hear. And I'm glad we don't all have like sob stories to share, because I've been thinking a lot about just racking up good memories. And my son, Ben, again, his pen name that I penned, but anyway, Ben, he's having his ups and downs. And when he has a good day, my best reaction is, okay, we had a chance to make some more good memories. And so put it in the bank, because next week might not be so good. So you've had a whole summer of building up good memories, and that's fantastic, because I know we've all gone through periods where we thought we're done. We'll never have a good memory again.
Right. And then after he got back, he felt so well that he went to his own apartment, and he hasn't actually been there for any more than to touch base and get the mail for, almost since before COVID. And so he went, and then he was there and for 3 days, and we did not hear from him. And then I began to panic. I thought, oh, we had this wonderful time, and now this is how this is going to end. He's so happy. Somehow he saw his life not being quite as good as he wanted at his cousins and so forth. So, but he was just binge watching old movies over the Labor Day weekend. But, just that really utopia, and then a period of nothing was enough to make me panic.
Yeah. Of course. It's like PTSD, because the last time that happened, who knows, right? Mm-hmm. So he's doing okay. Is he spending more time in his own apartment now?
Well, now he's back. So, but 3 days when he hadn't really been gone for over 2 years was quite a span. But we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, it is. We see the light to get out of the woods, and they were like, "Whoops, nope, no, let's go back in." And so we're having kind of a mixed bag of a time. So my son, as you know, if you're a regular listener, he used to be, and this, again, this podcast is not a commercial for Clozaril, but for me, that was my favorite medication he was on, but it wasn't his. And he's currently on a time release injection of Haldol. And what's good is that he doesn't feel stuck having to take medication every day. So that's good. He feels more free. And we've had people on the show who, a couple of them have asked me to take their episodes down right now. They're just going through a period of not feeling okay. And that happens with schizophrenia, but we have had people talk about how they like the injections, but they know when they need it. My son doesn't know when he needs it. He just follows the schedule, and given his druthers, he would not take it. What's good about it, though, is that if he wanted to stay here overnight, he could. We don't have to give him medication. And some things are better. He seems a little less paranoid, a little more open, and yet I see his hand shaking when we're not looking. I see a few twitches when we're not looking. And I believe that once a month is not frequent enough, because we know if he's due for 5 days, he may come, and God bless him. And I always like to talk about the strengths of our sons, because everyone always asks us, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? But what are their strengths? My son, unless the illness gets so strong that his good intentions get totally squashed, when given the option, he will opt for good intentions. So I see him hold it together in order to play with his nieces and nephew. Like, he'll hold it together for them. And then when they're not looking and he goes out for a cigarette and it's like this close to needing the injection, I see him talking to invisible people. So I know I see the symptoms, and it's frightening to see, because I remember when that led down a really, I don't want to say dark path, because he's, thank God, not violent, but a very paranoid path, a very strange path. And so I'm just like, take the injection. I'm like Shirley MacLaine in terms of endearment, go, get my son the injection. So, the sweet spot is, a couple of weeks after it ramps up and before it ramps down. On those good days, we're like, he's back. We got some good memories today, but when he needs it, it is frightening. Now, the other good thing is he's working, knock wood. He got a job in a superstore, a Kohl's, and he's taking the job seriously. He's biking to work. He loves working. There are 6 or 7 days will go by, I don't hear from him, but he's in a group home with staff, so it's okay. And a friend called him from his childhood and asked him what he's doing. And for the first time ever, he said, oh, I live in a group home. Like, he's never said that before. He was like, I live with roommates. So it was then there are the wows, and the fact that he bikes to work, loves his
really
job.
Good exercise and motivation.
Ask me if he has saved any money from his paycheck. He buys clothing, but he's not buying drugs. So, so it's just like, I just try to say, okay, I would love to take another day and make more good memories, but we didn't get to see him this weekend. He was working, then I was working. So it is a relief to have staff to take care of him. But I just don't know what next week will bring ever. So to see my son shaking like he has Parkinson's is frightening. And, but you got to stay in the moment. That's my lesson. It's just stay in the moment. If it's a good day, take the good day.
Well, the interesting thing is that's the lesson everybody should learn about every situation. You know what I mean? There was this convergence of, I had gone off to learn yoga and meditation and all of that so that I could cope with this situation with Nick, and it changed my whole world outlook, and then I could cope. But I've realized that I should always have been that way. That's the way to be, is in the moment and not trying to control everything. I mean, I know that that's been my downfall in my life, and this was like a pretty harsh awakening, but it did change the way I interact in the world, big time.
There are some good things about schizophrenia, and that's one. I feel that way too. I'm probably not as free of a spirit ever as you, Mimi, but in my world, I've made some progress.
And that's how we're each of our families and each of our loved ones, we're on whatever journey we're on. And I think I've told you guys this story before, but a friend of mine who sadly passed away 2 weeks ago. I'm just floored. He had pulmonary fibrosis, and I thank God I went into New York, and the journey is always part of the gift, and visited him for 2 or 3 hours when he seemed hopeful. And he died a week later, but that's just like his last words to me were, I just want more time. I want more time to help more people. And that, that just stays with me. And anyway, he had sent me to this psychic astrologer or whatever as a gift one time, like 10 years ago. And we were talking about my son and everything. And I remember saying to her, look, there has been good things for me about schizophrenia. I'm able to help people with my journey, and I become more compassionate and blah, blah, blah. But as I'm sure you guys agree, I would give it all up in a second in order to have my son be well, and she said, well, that's not your choice. This whole thing isn't about your journey. It's his journey too. He's on his journey, and you're just a supporting player in his journey. And so it kind of freed me. I don't have total control over his life. And it was kind of freeing to realize that, and I don't know why. I don't really spend a lot of time going, why? Because it doesn't help. But what I want to be on his journey is someone who was there for him as much as I could be, and loved him and saw the good, and advocated and fought like a tiger when I could, and then sometimes let him go and do what he needed to do. And, anyway, so that's getting a little deep, but that's what this is for. And it's his journey. I don't know why. I don't know if he looks at his life and sees his friends that, don't have minimum wage job, although minimum wage isn't as bad as it used to be. If he never complains about his life. I don't know how
Nick doesn't either. And, even in the hospital when he was so ill, he was always pleasant to everybody, and the nurses all loved him, and he, always polite, always nice, never, like, the worst he would say, he was literally on death's door, and I would say to him, hey, how are you doing this morning, when I would come in, and he would go, the worst he would say is so, like when you knew he did so, he was dying, right? But he doesn't complain.
Wow.
Oh, so Jim is the Greilings complain. You saw Angela, our daughter, when she was on the program, and your two daughters were, being so nice and positive. And Anne said, no, I resent my brother at times, etc. So I will say that Jim does complain sometimes. He's not a big complainer. People love him wherever he goes, even though he thinks people don't like him. That's part of his paranoia. But he's very pleasant and kind to everybody. But I don't know if complain is the right word, but he's very wistful about the life he could have had.
Yeah, I think complaining is
compared to his current life. He's very wistful, and he sees his cousins, and he sees his sister, and now his niece, our granddaughter, just started college, last week, and he's like, wait, when I was her age, I got sick, that's when my life kind of stopped. So I don't see complaining, but wistfulness.
Well, but that's insight.
Yeah.
See, that's insight. I try and get Nick to talk about it. Just yesterday, we were spending the day, and I said, Nick, do you ever feel angry that this happened to you, that you got schizophrenia? Do you ever just feel like mad at the universe or something, or anything like that? Because I'm not trying to put ideas in his head, but I want him to be able to talk about it. And he said, and this is a way different than anything he's ever said before. He said, well, it's frustrating sometimes. And like, that's a big step in terms of insight. Yeah. And we talked about, I talked to him a little bit about peer counselors and why that's so good, because you're dealing with people who understand the same thing. But I think there's a difference between being pleasant and trying so hard and not complaining. I mean, I think being wistful or I think that sort of complaining, or that's insight. That's being aware and seeing and understanding what's going on.
I like that way to think about it.
Yeah.
So while I won't complain then, but I'm going to say I'm wistful, Randye, that Ben is spending his money and he's spending it on clothes, because Jim has a job too. It's another minimum wage job. But he's currently spending a lot of his spare money on like toxic cleanses or some sort of
Oh, boy.
supplement that he spends $75 a bottle on and that sort of thing. And I've got him to run them by his doctor, so we know, they're not harming him, or ones that he stopped. But that's taking up a lot of funds.
Yeah, it's funny, and we're in a moment. I think we'll each end with a just lesson to take away from this catch up, not quite out of the woods conversation. I'm very glad my son's not buying pot. They drug test him at his job so that, again, inside this person is a frozen in time adolescent who it doesn't want to do what mommy says. So, it's not about me. The less it's about me, the better. It's funny that he has dreams of having a car again and, saving for his own apartment, but he doesn't put money toward it. And that's a very juvenile way of thinking, because of the cognitive impairment that remains even after you're stabilized. So it's okay with me. I really don't want him driving. So that works for me. But, I go again, it's just sort of, so I guess toxic cleanses are better than buying some of the stuff. I know Jim has had drug problems.
You bet. Yes. We've made some progress.
But, as I always say, it is what it is, and we are where we are. We were all praying in every conceivable religion possible for Nick when he was in the, we were like, whatever religion, we'll take it. Thoughts,
Whatever
vibes,
works.
prayers.
And you know what? Let me just say this for my farewell or ending thing is, it was a weird thing for me because although, yes, I've written a book and I talk about this all the time, I'm not wildly public. And usually when I'm going through something like this, it wouldn't have been on Facebook. But what happened was, it happened so fast. And we brought him to the hospital on a Wednesday, and it was then Saturday, and it was just going downhill so fast. And I realized, oh my God, I had not even talked to my brother. Like, I'd only talked to his sisters. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I was at the hospital, and there was no time to really. And I thought, I can't bear all the phone calls because, then you call one relative, you better call the other ones. Right. And so I thought, I'll just post it on Facebook so people know what's happening. Because I also didn't think it was going to be this bad. I thought in a day or two, I'll be posting he's fine and going home. So I'll just post it. Right. So I posted it on Facebook, but I did it from my phone in the hospital. And I didn't realize when I do that, it automatically posts it also on Instagram where I have thousands of people.
Oh, geez.
And so it became wildly public. And I was a little caught off guard because it felt a little weird because then it got so bad and so scary and it looked like he could die. And meanwhile, strangers are, calling me or writing. But I have to say, all said and done, I am so overwhelmed by the, tsunami of love and good wishes and prayers and people thinking about him and I couldn't believe it. Total strangers and following up and making sure. And I also firmly believe that well of good wishes or prayers or whatever you want to call it, I think it helped him. I really do. I believe it helped him, And yesterday we went and we were with some people that we know here in Washington who hadn't seen him in a while. And my friend Annie, she, everybody was so happy to see him. And she said, Nick, can I just hug you? And, because Nick doesn't, he'll sometimes fist bump or something. And he says, yeah. And she just threw her arms around him. And I said to him afterwards in the car, I said, do you see how happy? Everybody was so worried about you. People were so happy to see you and see you okay. And he said something to the fact that, yeah, it really makes me feel good that people's concern for me. That makes me feel really good. And that again is also a connectedness that he didn't used to have. And so I'm grateful for all of that. As always, it's not without its wonderful gifts. I just wish that all these wonderful gifts didn't come at the cost of the quality of Nick's life.
Gotcha.
And all that comes to you because you're open about his illness. I feel so bad for families that aren't able to talk about their family members' mental illness, or they don't feel they have permission, or, many reasons why the family culture. But as soon as you are able to talk about your family member, then that sort of support comes forth. And that's so important. I believe in the power of prayer too.
That's great. That sounds like your final word, right?
Yes.
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 So, and I'll just say for mine, what has been reinforced for me in this conversation, besides how much I love you guys, is, just if you get a day where you get to make a good memory, just put that in your pocket and keep it, like catch a falling star and put it in your pocket. Because if you have a time and a memory is good, then that is a gift, because no one's guaranteed anything. So enjoy the days of good memories, because as we well know, with chutes and ladders, there will be other days. And the other thing is, when you're able to focus on the strengths in your loved one, because this illness makes us focus so much on what's wrong and what we can't fix, that there's still, I hope, some strengths that he or she can call on, combined with the right treatment and structure and purpose and love, that can make their life better than you fear. Maybe not as good as you hope, but better than you fear. So focus on strength and good memories, and let's all send prayers for a cure one of these days. That is nice. And so that's it. It's just us episode to catch up, and just I hope that you maybe felt not so alone by hearing our stories. And I'll see you guys next week when we have Dr. Gary Tsai joining us. So
I look forward to that one.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches, with Randye Kay, Mindy Greiling, and Miriam Feldman. To get in touch with us or to learn more about our books, please visit our websites at miriam-feldman.com, mindygreiling.com, or randyk.com.